I want to tell you about some studies that I and others have done in the last 10 years. Aware of the Quran about 10 years ago when I visited Saudi Arabia at the invitation of King Abdulaziz University to lecture in embryology. And at that time I was asked about some of the meaning of some of the verses in the Quran. And I tried to interpret them as best I could. And that really started a study which has lasted for about 10 years in a part-time way. The first scientific studies in embryology, as far as we know, were done by the Greek scientists in the 5th century BC. And later Aristotle, another famous Greek, actually opened eggs and was able to study the development, concluded at that time, and this is 4th and 5th century BC, that man's development, that is human development, was similar to that of the chicken. Around 200 AD, until the 16th century, no major advances in our knowledge of embryology were recorded in the literature of Western science. This is mainly because these kind of studies were forbidden in those very dark ages. Consequently, as far as we know, until the revelations in the Quran, man was relatively ignorant about his reproduction and development. It was not until the invention of the microscope in the 17th century that any significantly new information was added to the field of embryology. When the microscope was discovered until 1973, when Dr. Ronan O'Reilly developed a more detailed system for classifying human embryos, particularly during the first 3 weeks of development. Now, these Carnegie stages, that is named after the Carnegie Institute of Embryology, have received international approval and are based on various developmental events and morphological criteria. And these timetables of human development are from my book, which I developed in about 1970, based on the Carnegie stages of human development. And at this time, when I did these stages, I had no awareness that there was anything about human development in the Quran. Now, it was about this time that I began to study the Quran and to look at verses referring to embryology. So I found that there was a large terminology in the Quran referring to human development. Recently, it was not known that this holy book of the Muslims and the Sunnah, or Hadith, the teachings of Muhammad, contained many citations referring to the stages of human development. Until recently, these statements were not clearly understood, since they refer to details in development which were scientifically unknown in earlier times. In fact, the Islamic system for classifying human embryos is amazing, since it was recorded in the 7th century AD. Detailed studies would have been impossible without the microscope. In the very early stages of human development, the first few days, it's so small that you could just barely see it. In other words, it's about the size of a period at the end of a sentence. And you could realize how, without our modern microscopes, you would not be able to see any of those details of the early stages. Now, as far as we know from the history of embryology, little was known about the staging and classification of human embryos until the last 100 years. For this reason, the descriptions of human embryos in the Quran cannot be based on scientific knowledge in the 7th century. The only reasonable conclusion is that these descriptions were revealed to Muhammad, peace be upon him, by God. He could not have known such details because he was an illiterate man. He was not a scientist or an embryology, and he did not have scientific training. God created man from a quintessence of clay. He then placed him as a Nutfa, a droplet, in a place of settlement, firmly fixed. Then we make the Nutfa into an Alaqah, a leech-like structure, and then he changed the Alaqah into a Mudghah, a chewed-like substance. Then we made out of that Mudghah Isam, I can't read too well here, skeleton, and then we clothed the bones with muscles. Then we caused him to grow And then we came into bone, into being, and attained the definitive human form. So blessed be God, the best to create. The conclusions of this study are that the terms which have been used in the Quran are very descriptive of developments which occur in the various stages, and they describe these events in their chronological order. Morphological changes that occur with development in each stage are also accurately described by the use of these terms. The proposed system is simple, comprehensive, and conforms with present embryological knowledge. The facts about human development that could not have been known by Muhammad, peace be upon him, in the 7th century, because most of them were not discovered until the 20th century. Muslims and others are justified in concluding that these facts could only have been revealed to Muhammad, peace be upon him, by God, who knows all about us, not only about how we develop, but how we live and function. Thank you very much.